Hey guys, so basically I get asked in one of my montages to actually show my build, and I'm more than willing to do that because you have to know I play on multiple builds. It's one in World vs. World, for example, and also situation in PvP. I switch my templates. So yeah, I would say let's just dive into the PvP build first. Alright, so for the PvP build, I actually run Berserker's Amulet, which gives you the absolute power stats you need for that build, but provides less survivability. Another possibility to actually run with is the Marauder's Amulet, which is like um, the core game or the core mode Marauder stats. So these are comparable. You will see them in World vs. World as well, because I'm also running Berserk on that, because I just like the challenge actually of um, running with such a squishy character around. But a bit support gives you the Rune of Divinity actually, which is I think mostly recommended for these builds actually. Yeah. So you see you get like diviner stats through that rune. And plus 10% maximum health, which maxes out your efficiency with that build to actually survive. Right, on the short bow, which I currently place, like, you can totally decide in which position you put that. I just do that mentally for me. So I actually use the short bow in assault more often. This helped me to get when I learned the thief, or to understand the class in that sense. I wasn't using my short bow for kiting that often, and placing it as the main, like the primary weapon in that set, helped me to get more in touch with that weapon. So what sigils I give them? It's the sigil of energy, where you gain 25% of your endurance when you swap to this weapon while in combat, which is actually sometimes very handy. I will show you some tricks later on after I explained this build and the World vs. World build, because they are somewhat similar, and situationally you can play in very similar situations, very similar playstyles. So yeah, we're gonna watch that later. How, for example, this sigil could be used. Right, and the sigil of pleasing, because you swap to the short bow situationally when you want to kite the enemy, for example, or when you are like randomly engaging into a group fight, for example, which could be in World vs. World, the Zerg fightings and the team fight on mid, for example, in PvP. You actually want to swap to that weapon as well, and you get a lot of healthy options for your build to survive a bit more in under pressure situation, especially if you have to already like +1 the situation, which is not good looking for your team on PvP on mid, because you are outnumbered. But this could actually help you against condition pressure to survive a bit longer or to evade. On the daggers, we are running a sigil of exploitation and a pistol as the second choice. We're running sigil of exposure. What these two provide you is actually a good option for the thief, because you already have the trait line I will show you in a second, where you do like damage to targets below 50% health, and this like maxes out to 10%. I think it was also 5%, but I'm not sure about that. On the trade line, we will look into that in a second. Right, and the sigil of exposure gives you 5 stacks of vulnerability on your target for 5 seconds, which is also somewhat good, because you want to max out the conditions. And this build already provides hell ton of conditions, not for long, not for strong, but in a good sense that you, for example, apply bleeding and poison with your standard attacks, and blindness, blindness. Yeah, you can see, and another one is here. Like I'm currently playing on that side. This because of the 3 versus 3 season, but I constantly switch between other options, like the Basilisk Venom, for example, when I play against more somewhat tankier builds or roles, like bunker roles, defending roles, but also against very squishy targets where I know I could almost one-shot them, like a lot of ranger builds and specs currently running. So yeah, I don't really recommend the Thief's Guild because of the high cooldown, but I do recommend the Dagger Storm, which I mostly use when I'm under heavy direct or condition damage or like far range damage. Then I can actually, yeah, go through the storm with my own. So the Impairing Daggers actually give you the opportunity to down low health enemies in a very short and efficient way, because you immobilize them, get close to them, and kill them even if they're above the death mark threshold. Yeah, which means you basically can chase enemies without getting yourself into the risk of letting them back in the group fight or something where they get healed, or no, you can actually outfocus them. The Signet of Agility provides you passively 180% precision as like to the build, which increases the critical hit chance. You see? And when I get somebody just provided me Might and Fury, which my build provides as well, and you can see I was on 80%, which is very vital for that whole build to actually function. You have to work on precision sides. I will show you later on in the World vs. World build as well what you can actually do with a Berserker build and the right precision setup. Actively, it removes 3 conditions, with it your absolute lifesaver. Like when you watch my montages, you've seen me barely dying of any condition damage, because the timing of the Signet of Agility is #1 rule of surviving with the Berserker gear. So you can't swap this. Like you can swap these, for example, also to Distracting Daggers to give them a bit more interrupt because of the days, which is a condition that has the chance to, like the 100% chance to interrupt a current build if it's not blocked. So 3 of them you can at range throw at the enemy, which with a very low recharge time and a cooldown of 15 after you once completed the whole charge. Yeah, this can actually help you a lot against, for example, Blade Sworn or any class that has currently the potential to stun you to death. Yeah, and prepare a massive burst so you can actually interrupt them. What I personally currently prefer, because of the squishiness in the current meta, I prefer to play on Impairing Daggers. Right. Another survivability option I wouldn't swap is the Shadow Step and Shadow Return, because it's also an offensive rune and gives you also the chance to stump actually without getting interrupted or barely getting interrupted, if you know how to place it on hard to reach spots for the current enemy team, because you can use the Shadow Step while stomping the enemy. So this can be used very creatively and unpredictably as well, and gives you sometimes the upper hand over the fight. So I highly recommend you to actually use that instead of any other utility like Blinding Powder, for example, or Power for Initiative, because they are both too like good as well. Or this in 3 vs 3 or 2 vs 2 currently is another like creative option you could take, but I would recommend you to either swap the Impairing Daggers for that, but not this, like not the shadow step. You can even swap the signet, because this will be a very bursty build with that. But yeah, it's up to your preferences. You can swap whatever you want, but just remember, this will save your life. My go-to trade line for all of the PvP seasons is usually the Shadow Arts, but for the 3 vs 3, I will show in a second why. You are better off, like I will explain this further, but you were better off with Critical Strike, because all of the burst is currently in the meta, so you get a health threshold on 90%, you get basically deal more critical damage because of the critical chance is increased by 10%. Applying also Twin Fangs gives you another critical damage increase while your health threshold is above 90%. And like your chance on damage are increased by 7%. Yeah, you get Fury by this build, and you also want to basically increase the ferocity based on precision with that. There are also some other options I will explain in a second, but yeah, right. The Ferocious Strike basically gives you the chance to deal more damage while the by critical damage, while the foe's health is above the threshold of 50%. Yeah, and from the elite trait, you go with the Fury, and the ferocity while under this effect is increased by 300. So, I almost forgot. If you're using these critical strikes, you actually have a very important or very powerful choice here in 3 vs 3, because in 2 vs 2 I usually observe that targets are spreading too far to actually you taking advantage of that trait. But in 3 vs 3, when you have a cluster of enemies, you have the opportunity to actually pierce with your pistol. So piercing means it's like it doesn't jump like an arrow, for example. That one, like it's called bounces, the mechanic. But it pierces, so it can go through the target and apply additional boons. So apply additional conditions. So while you're running on a blind build, it can be very useful for the enemy team to blind them with the piercing shots. So this might be an interesting option for you in the current season. On the other hand, if you're doing regular seasons and want to have more mobility and a further survival build, you actually use Shadow Arts. You can also go for acrobatics, but I prefer Shadow Arts. I will explain this now, because it is based on stealth, a lot of stealth, and it can also increase your healing capabilities by spider venom. So basically when you go into stealth for 2 seconds, you also get healing applied to you, which is the core trait for that. Hidden Thief also applies blindness and weakness. You want to apply as many conditions as possible. I will explain later why this is a thing. And you also get super speed while entering or exiting stealth, which is a great mobility boost for your whole roaming role you basically take with this build. Yeah, Leeching Weapons, I just explained that you have a healing chance on that because you deal damage and you life siphon healing with that while entering or exiting stealth. It has a cooldown of 30 seconds, but in longer fights or while you're roaming, this will be no problem for you to withstand. Shadow Siphoning also is a option, a very, very good one for stealth attacks. It actually helps you get back to a certain amount of health while dueling, for example, a thief or another roamer or side noder that just went into your roaming zones or path, and you can actually help yourself by attacking them. So in very low life situations, best option is not just to evade or disengage the fight, but maybe to actually fight them. I put a in World vs. World, for example, this counts as well, and I put a video of myself having a very close call situation and how that actually helped me by attacking the enemy. I will put that in at the end of the montage. We'll see a video of that. Yeah, and Shadow's Rejuvenation, I can really not pronounce that. I'm very sorry. Sometimes we all know we need dictionaries for guild wars. While entering or exiting stealth, it gives you 2 initiative on enter and 1 on exit, and you will need that. While you already have through Trickery your initiative count maxed out, you really want to have as much initiative as possible, because you will basically spam by having a dynamic gameplay. And this helps you to sustain a bit longer. As I just hinted the benefits of the Trickery trait line by gaining more sustainability with initiative, you also have initiative plus initiative while stealing, and with Thrill of the Crime you basically have for this Shadow Arts trait line a very good support of Fury and Swiftness and Might. You might change that to Quickness to burst the enemy down. This is a very important trait if you go in on Critical Strike, because you basically have no real sustainability on that side. If you want to burst down, do it as quick as possible. There's a similar trait line on the Deadeye, which is called Be Quick or Be Killed, which you can then swap if you're using Trickery on Thrill of the Crime. So this combination for that. The Preparedness increases the maximum initiative by 3. This is one of your most important trait lines. Why you're using Trickery? Because you need a lot of initiative for that bit in order to work, because it has currently the thief is not in a good place, besides what Arena says, but it's not in a good place, and it needs a lot of support by your traits, and you have to know the class to actually play in like gold or platinum, and it's a very dynamic gameplay. So this gives you usually the opportunity to be very flexible with your all of your skills, but keep in mind that it also has a very useless option for that build, which is Expertise. You don't really use that because it's just 150. I mean, if you know what Expertise does, it increases your condition duration. So your targets are longer applied with your blindness, for example, but it's a very low number in that case. So this is not the best. Like, you don't have to, if you see that, you don't have to actually transform your build based on the expertise you're getting here, because you think like, oh, I could actually like work in that direction. Just keep the maximum initiative, take that, and the other thing, just forget about it. The Bountiful Theft gives you Vigor, which is endurance regeneration. We have, because of the Daredevil trait line, we have 3 evades. So having this is a very good way of helping you to sustain high pressure. And you have seen me probably, if you watch my montages, I will link them down below in the description. You can watch them, and maybe I will also add some material in the end of this build guide where you can actually see how I'm using or how I'm timing my evades and why this is important. Also, it gives you an additional, if you're not running on this, then not an additional, but solo boon steal option. So yeah, this is actually a very important trait line for you to use. One of the most important things, and people always forget that, don't use your steal for the startup. You see me doing that probably, but that's because I want to interrupt the opening of certain builds that are very bursty currently. But usually you use that also a lot during the fight when you don't have, for example, distracting daggers equipped, which can interrupt the enemy. You are dependent on this trait, which, yeah, on the one hand recharges the reduce the recharge of your steel. On the other hand, it dazes, so it interrupts instantly. Like, when I say instantly, most interrupts take some time. I mean preparation time of the casting. But this instantly applies and now has a 17-second cooldown, which is pretty good. And you will use it if you're dueling, for example. Probably you will use it like 3 times in a matchup. Now to the Daredevil, the last trait line. You gain access to physical skills, which is actually the impairing daggers, for example, and the distracting daggers, and also the fist flurry. You can also run with it, or situationally with the reflexive strikes. These are all great options. I prefer this rather in World vs. World, not in PvP. But this can be a bursty option if you have trouble dealing damage in a very short time. You can also rely on that, but it's very hard to hit, I have to tell you. It's very hard to hit. This is much more like it's auto-targeting. It's flying to the target. And it can be tricky as well sometimes actually to hit, especially if there's a lot of reflection going on with the enemy side. But you will see how it actually works. Like, you get a feeling for it if you play on that option. So the weakening strikes applies weakness. What a surprise. No, but it charges you with that option to deal increased damage and get reduced damage by like 10% and increased damage by 7%, as you can see. When the enemy is applied weakness, and you get the charge when you dodge an attack. And you will dodge quite often. You will evade a lot of incoming damage options, attacks. You will get that applied to your enemy. So it's a very, very useful trait. The Havoc Specialist is you are dependent on strike damage, so you do direct damage, power in that build, and you will deal increased damage per missing endurance bar. So if you're already evading and doing like a good evade time, keep in mind, don't overdo just to get the 5%. I mean, it's a lot of damage, getting 50% in total, but just keep in mind, this is your only survivability on that build, really. Like, a lot of different builds on other classes provide enough survivability with blocking, like that one for example, but it's not that useful on that build. So surviving with endurance regeneration and good timing of your endurance and how you use it for evades is totally vital. It's critical. Right. Endurance Thief. Another thing you get because the Daredevil is basically your second half of this endurance build. You get 25 endurance when you steal from an enemy. I will show you later on how that actually works when we get into a presentation of how the build works. And some tips and tricks I will tell you. Right. Dash is your best survivability option. It gives you the chance to evade from any stunning condition that could be potentially deadly, like mobilizing, for example, or chilling, which can be hard hitting. Like, you can be super slow and almost totally immobile. So this is a very good option. Also crippling, which can be easily applied by very like many classes in this game and specs in this game. Right, and the legendary swiftness you get by that build is a super interesting choice, also for World vs. World, but when you're capping, it gives you the upper hand over roaming if there's no other thief, no other Daredevil on the enemy side, because just look how much endurance you get by that. You get 28 and total, like 29, 30%, 30 seconds of swiftness, which will keep you updated with swiftness for quite a long time. So, for the World vs. World, I'm just switching to my most used template because I'm switching a lot between different builds. This is just my World vs. World character, so it's all stacked with one PvP build in it. Which I showed you, which I differ between different trait lines, and this basically stacked with World vs. World stuff. So I will show you my two most used World vs. World builds currently. I rely on while privately or solo roaming, occasionally roaming with other people. I swap to the Deadeye, usually for that, with a rifle for that chance, but I mostly stick with that build. It's a lot different to the PvP build because it runs on like Trickery as well with the same trait lines. I already explained those. If you use the jump mark to jump to my World vs. World explanation now in the video, I highly recommend you jumping back so I explain the Trickery a bit more in depth. But this basically gives you initiative and endurance options, and also gives you, oh, I didn't explain that I think in the last time, but this is a more damage based version, so you don't just keep your, because it's also with the Daredevil trait lines, you don't keep your just your endurance down to do more damage. You can see that here. But you also keep your initiative down, which gives you lead attacks, which deal also more damage on any side. Like, keep in mind that you have an increased expertise, and here you do increase condition damage, which is not much, and I told you, forget about it, but at least it's a kind of, not a celestial version, but in damage-wise, it does stack you up on each damage side you can provide on the enemy. The main difference on that build is that you're running on Dudley Arts, which like the most important thing that you have to use is improvisation. It gives you the chance of using stone skills twice and reducing the cooldown of all equipped utility skills when you steal. So it has a very low recharge, and you already have a reduced recharge for stealing, so this basically goes conform with your stealing timing you want to apply. So yeah, in between the cooldown of the stealing, you can actually use the stolen skills like 2 times, and this is a great option for you if you want to survive against and counter the actual classes you're playing against, because you get class specific skills that you steal from them, like healing skills from a ranger, or stealthing skills from a thief. So yeah, like having a stealth option 2 times in a row is a very incredible, useful option to run on. Rest of the trait line, you basically have the you have the chance to apply poison with your stealing attack. You deal even damage and heal yourself. So this is, compared to the PvP, this even has a more survival option. Because in the right situation you can interrupt a heal. For example, when you're dueling, and imagine you're both on low health, you actually heal yourself by 1980 and interrupt the enemy's healing time, which will apply a short cooldown to the healing skill, so you get the chance to burst them down in that situation. Right, Lotus Poison weakens the target when you poison them, so you poison them by stealing, and you also poison them by your Lotus Strike. Even the odds apply vulnerability when you steal, gain might when you hit with his stealth attack. I think this explains for itself. Expose weakness, the increased strike damage to your target for each unique condition on them. So this is the reason why I told you guys earlier in the video, I think on the PvP build, or even before that, when we just started to dive into a bit of everything. You basically apply as much conditions as possible, and having the expertise up to like increase, it's not much, as I said, to increase the condition just a slightly bit. I mean, it's good that it is there, but it has no real use on that side, because you constantly spam the enemy and with blindness and everything. So yeah, the damage gets increased by lead attack, by the Havoc Specialist, and also by the condition pressure you pull on the enemy. So yeah, and improvisation I just explained. So this is round up what you're gonna use. Currently on that side, like, it's the same I explained in the PvP build. On that side, like, this is your survivability, this as well. I wouldn't change that in any chance on World vs. World, because of how long the duels actually go, and it has a formidable recharge time and cooldown of 30 seconds. So yeah, distracting daggers is your, in my opinion, best option you can run on. I don't see many people using it, but it is a very underrated and good option. But also you can change to empowering daggers. You can even use Fist Flurry if you know how to actually use that in World vs. World, because it can be very hard to move a high dynamic target, like in Daredevil, for example. So even if you think, oh yeah, squishy target, I can burst them down, keep in mind that they're usually also very mobile, not as mobile as you sometimes. I would even say the that I can be more mobile in that sense, but yeah, I personally stick most of the time with the distracting daggers. And situationally, when I want to switch, we come to the next build, is my Deadeye rifle build for World vs. World. Yeah, so it runs basically with the Trickery lines. There's nothing new about that, but I go on Shadow Arts with a little bit of a different survivability option, because you can remove condition when you enter X stealth. You will do that a lot, because basically when you equip a rifle and you wait, you get stealth. So, but it's very situational when you use the rifle. You're not using it only for kiting, you're using it also situationally for applying a lot of damage in a short time. Yeah. Super speed I explained. Leeching venoms is then when you also use like exiting or entering stealth, you get spider venom, which heals you and deals damage. Yeah, alright. So far to that. The Deadeye trait line provides you the Deadeye's mark. Is a very good stealing replacement, which can apply different boons and for you and for conditions for the enemy if you equip it in if you equip everything you equip on stealing on that side without the elite spec. applies for Deadeye's mark. So for example, if you go for a condition build, you automatically, for stealing, you automatically apply it on the target via this Deadeye's mark. So open one in the chamber. This is a very interesting option for you when you cast a cantrip, gain a random new stolen skill. Stolen skills deal more damage. I think lately this got reworked, because the option before was that you gain 2 random stolen skills. I think it was very different to that. It was much more similar to improvisation, I think. But now, yeah, now it's that case that you gain a random new stolen skill when you use a cantrip, which can be that, for example, Shadowgast. So you basically want to equip as many good options of that. I chose those to trigger that one in a chamber trait. So just head down to that option, for example, Shadow Melt. You vanish into stealth and basically skip the reveal option. So yeah, and it also applies for 2-second stealth and has a charge of 2. The Shadow Gust is a cantrip that knocks away enemies and also stealth issues. You see, you get perma stealth on that build. And Mercy is a very important one. Yeah, you have to wait for that to actually use it. Don't spam it, because it gives you 3 initiative and it instantly refreshes your Deadeye's mark, including, keep that in mind, including the stolen skill, because that will just get overwritten. So make sure you use that, like the stolen skill that appears here once you mark the enemy. Then decide later on, while you also used the other options to gain skills, so you have a rotation in there, then you can actually, for the last option, use the cantrip. So you basically want to delay the use of Mercy as late as possible. Team fights, which this build in World vs. World is not the greatest option because of the single target burst you're doing. In large scale fights, this is just not, like, except if you're using dagger, but then I would run on dagger, for example. It's not an important trait in that case. It just says that the Deadeye's mark recharges that one if the enemy is killed, and it gives you a little bit of heal. It provides some survivability in that case, but if you're not doing a lot of 1 versus 2s, it's basically no interesting trait. Silent Scope. Gain precision, that I already told you. Gain precision while wielding a rifle. This is good, and it also, like, more importantly, stealth you while dodging. Iron Sight. Strike damage dealt to your marked target is increased, and strike damage taken from your marked targets is reduced. A similar trait like the Daredevil we recently watched. Yeah, it's just a handy feature of the Deadeye trait line. Steal Time. I use that personally. It is more recommended, I think, to actually use the Be Quick or Be Killed. Basically, it has a very, very speaking name for itself, because, yeah, you with the whole with the whole build you have to be quick or be killed. So the quickness, I already talked about that in the PvP, I think, build section. We when we were regarding this lesser haste. So this is a very good option. You get more power, you get more precision, and you get quickness to burst on the enemy fast. But that one has a very good stolen skill, which grants actually also quickness every time you use Deadeye's mark. And if you refresh that, or if you gain more stolen skills, then you just not use the Deadeye's mark to gain quickness, but the actual stolen time skill that appears here. And also you deal damage with these. You deal a fixed number of, I think it was something like in World vs. World is much lower currently, and it got also nerfed because it has a, in PvE it has a 300% boost. They nerfed that out from the raid builds, and in World vs. World it always was a little bit lower, like 500 or something like that, but still some very nifty damage you can actually apply. So yeah. So I'm gonna show you now how you actually use the World vs. World build, and very similar to the PvP build, but I make situational differences in this video. So basically what you're gonna do is you try opening with the cloak and dagger combination, where you get a lot of stealth. You can also show you some tricks. You can also jump back into that field, which I just failed. But usually in the fights you can jump back to increase the duration of stealth. So you have, when you're dueling a thief for example, you have the upper hand because you basically have the longest stealth time if you do that correctly and time it correctly. You can even do it a third time, yeah. Right, but there are also some, because of the, you know, your biggest enemy on that build is the revealed status. You get that once you attacked an enemy. Let me show you real quick. Now you get revealed, which you cannot stealth then while you're under that effect. So if you spam that, attack the enemy, get get revealed, you can be easily spotted and attacked. I mean, you can also be attacked by stealth, but you can more be spotted and you're squishy. Don't forget that stealth is your friend, as well as your evading skills. You have to just get used to over the time. You don't need to especially like learn something there. You just have to get used to the timing, and it gets into hand once you understood the build. But yeah, if you want to prevent a spam here and want to have a bit more of a smart play, you can actually use that later on. Like you attack the enemy, get back to, and then you stealth yourself and attack. So the enemy gets a bit more surprised by like, oh, I had to block that, but the enemy now, like the enemy thief, which is you, is now using a stealth attack while I already wasted my block or my survival option in that case. Like, yeah, this is a interesting mechanic you can actually use for your survivability and your damage doing. So what we just got out of that champion target golem is a bone crack, which has a stun and an interrupt, so you can actually use some of the stone skills. There's also when you form a guardian, when you steal from guardian, you get also an interrupt, which can help you in 3 vs 3, for example in PvP. There you just get one of the stun method, but in World vs. World it gives you additional. So in every team fight, I just want to explain, in every team fight, you have the, like if you +1, if you gank in a situation, like for example if like 2 people from different sides are, and one is yours, are fighting for a camp, you can actually help them if there's like down. You can, because of the stealth option when wrestling them, you can actually help them by preventing the enemy from stomping the down status mate. So with that, you have 2 chances of doing that, and you also have your steal with the days option to interrupt, and you also have your distracting dagger. So you will be well prepared to interrupt during the fight or in between when your friend is in a roaming group, for example. Could be also the case if your friend is down while being like, for example, you might get sniped from somewhere and it is a very squishy Deadeye and you want to interrupt the Deadeye first, then it stealths, like he stealths himself, and this is even in AoE damage method. You can get that from a lot of different mobs actually. Like in World vs. World you have the opportunity, the advantage actually of getting different stealing results, like yeah, through the improvisations trait line, by actually mobs like the golems or a drake, for example, and you get like different versions of those. And the one we just had, I want to explain, is an AoE, like an AoE damage field, so you can even interrupt the enemy while he or she is stealth. So this is an interesting combination you can use. You can't use that with the distracting daggers except if you hit it in a very weird way, and I don't recommend then that wasting on stealth targets. I only use that while the enemy is actively doing something and I can see what to actually prevent. Another important feature of your build is the dagger storm. So surviving with the dagger storm also means if you enable the... I'm playing on a Berserker build. I have already... Oh, I totally forgot to show you. Yeah, I'm running a Berserker build with superior Runes of Scholar, so this is a very squishy combination to run on, even with the weapons. I just give a quick insight on the weapons I run in World vs. World with the superior Sigil of Doom and the of Bloodlust, and all stacked with mighty and precise, as in the beginning of the video I told you, with the precise option, so you actually get your critical chance up to 60% on core precision. Yeah, but if you're running on that and don't want to run on a Marauder option, which can be also very good. I think I have the... yeah, this is the Marauder, like power, precision, vitality, ferocity, and this is a Berserker option. If you're running on that, you actually want to have more vitality, but you can also switch... just watch the health bar now. If I switch... whoops, I'm in combat. Alright, let's get out of combat. When you switch... oh well. When you switch, you get escapist with escapist fortitude. You get healing while evading. So, and this is a constant evade. If you do that, then you get a lot of health back. So this is a good survival option if you combine that. But you can of course run with Marauder's Resilience, get a bit more health, like 1000 more health, which can be the tipping point of how to win. And run on Basilisk Venom, or even in World vs. World I recommend that, the Thieves Guild. So for actually opening fights, I recommend first, because don't spam this if you see the opportunity and you have like, if you get more in depth, I really recommend you go into the wiki and see what stealing actually can give you. From different classes or mobs, and if you get in depth into that, I don't want to explain that now because it would expand the video to an unpredictable scale currently. But if you know what to actually do and have a very in the situation against a bursting chronomancer, for example, and you want to have the bubble to increase your stats and get a bit of an advantage, like 2 times in a row, because there is no stealing mechanism, so you don't have to be revealed or something, and you want to have this double damage, for example, from a Various, you can also use that. Then you can open with stealth. With stealing, I mean. But otherwise, you also, or like, if you want to spam anything on that build, it's Shadow Shot. Because Shadow Shot blinds, but keep in mind that other than Heartseeker, which has a similar damage increase, not increase, but a similar damage type compared to Shadow Shot in the intensity, because like below 50% you usually hit them and get them to below 50%, so these are pretty similar in damage compared, but this only costs 3 initiative, while this costs 5 initiative. So already by the Trickery trait line you have with, what was it, lesser no, it was something else, but with Trickery you get more initiative, but even that, don't spam that totally. Like, you want to get them blinded, but rather attack them with your standard attacks then, once you get them blinded, because you can see it takes a long time. Actually, when they attack, they lose the blind, so once attacked, but you have like, usually you have like a second to deal damage. Like, get in, zap, evade. So this can be your opening. Fighting with black powder means that you don't just spam that. You can stay in it because it prevents you from being totally focused and burst down. And if the enemy, usually they know, so you keep them away, but if the enemy don't know, they stand in that and you basically win the fight because you can actually burst them down because they have this constant blindness around them. What I love to do is spam my evasion skills during that, so I get a bit more out of the fight, like I already shown, and then take advantage of the fight with the last step. The Deadeye. So the Deadeye, if you want to switch to that, well, of course you can't during the fight, but if you get out of fight and want to situationally take advantage of the enemy by bursting them from range, do that with a rifle, but usually I also play very much with the combination of the stolen skills I use and deal damage and get quickness and just jump in and burst them down. This has no great survivability because you basically have 2 evades, which is for the thief, not much. You have to be very careful to not waste your evades, rather to get stealth by going inside, and also super speed to reposition yourself. So it's a more tricky build to actually play. I think I will do a separate video even for that, because it's a whole different mechanic. It can be very similar, but to understand the burst mechanics, there are some tips and tricks. I will gladly do a second video about that. Let me know in the comments if you would like that. And so far we've been through the video. I hope you learned something valuable. And if you have any questions whatsoever regarding my playstyle with the builds, just let me know, and I will show you some, like in the end, I will show you some of the already posted montages, just a quick cutout of them, so you can have a look how the actual dagger pistol builds I just showed you in World vs. World and PvP might work for you as well. So just enjoy watching. Thank you very much for following my build, and yeah, see you the next time. Bye!